Welcome back to Deep Thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm sitting around my house. I've had a pretty amazing day. I visited with a good friend of mine. Hadn't seen in a while, which is always fantastic. And he turned me on to this amazing gentleman, which I'm going to do a massive deep dive on. It'll probably take a month, if not more. I think his name is Gurdjieff. Gurdjiff. This gentleman has parsed the universe. He's born in the mid-1800s. He dies in the late 30s, I believe. And my buddy had to do a presentation on him, or a movie for this Fifth Press company. He narrated it. I'll probably put it up there for you guys to see. Did a brilliant job. But it really sparks me for my Infinity project, which is, as some of you might remember, I think I revealed it in the vacuum episode. I've been trying to create a language that will merge metaphysics with physics in a way that we can theoretically and potentially mathematically address infinity. But also, it's the physical infinity and the spiritual infinity. Because what's fascinating about it is that we are a being that is made of the metaphysical and the physical. We are a soul and we are a body. I've pussyfooted around that notion probably because in my own mind I hadn't convinced myself of, I guess I would say, since I realized this was the case, I'm one of billions of people that have done it, but you feel a little insecure about completely committing to such a intangible definition of who you are, and especially when you start to fold it out to the universe and your fellow citizens, and you start to think, okay, if we were this, how would that change how we interact with each other? What other sciences immediately become revealed? This guy's got some piece of shit car out there backfiring. And what would be the use of any language or process or symbolism, literally, that you could write down if it didn't immediately have some promise of solving problems? And so I'm at that precipice in the project where I'm now trying to take these symbols that I've created and start integrating existing formulas that we do know exist in the physical world, which are where everything exists, and then some of the things that have been philosophized in the metaphysical world. And I think from this point forward, until I have some other further epiphany to deprecate this notion that we are a symbiotic soul-body being, you will always hear me reference from this point forward with a fairly stern level of confidence that is exactly what we are. But it's one thing to say, we call those clouds up there, before we have the ability to aviate to them, sample them, and figure out what they're actually made of. We still called them clouds. And that's the exact same thing that we have to do with referencing our souls, at least at the entry level of the game. But the beautiful thing is, we are those souls. I was sitting in my uncle's backyard. I think I might have mentioned this one time out of all the episodes. I'm sitting in my uncle's backyard, and I was heavy into poetry, writing the shit out of this stuff. And there was always a chord to the universe in my brain for poetry. And when I tried to write something, I was about to give advice. When I wrote something personally, it was usually crap. When I became nothing more than the vessel to write, it was beautiful. And if you're a good person and you have unanimously refused evil to be a part of your life, you're sort of in a hallowed ground within your soul and your mind and your body constantly. It doesn't mean you're perfect. You make big mistakes. You'll say things that are foul that you shouldn't say. But again, your intent is simply being corrupted by your naivete. So you're going to those dark places simply because you're dumb. You're ignorant. I shouldn't say you're dumb. You're ignorant to other ways of communicating. But I wrote this poem that I eventually called Truth. And this isn't a poem this is a subject that, the way I wrote it was profound to me. I must have been, I don't know how old I was. Maybe my late 20s, early 30s, maybe. I feel like I was in my late 20s. Irrelevant. Though when I was writing this, I got to the infinite loop of truth and the enigma of truth. And it's this bizarre thing. And it may not be an enigma and it may not be a paradox, but it feels that way sometimes, which is this. Is it possible to define ourselves as to what we are when we are the self that we are defining? It would seem that someone could look at someone else, and you look at a cat and you go, "Cat, tell me who you are." What do you mean? Well, you're a cat. You are the cat. So tell me, you should know all about cats because you are a cat. I don't know. I just am what I am. I have my instinctual programming. I kind of lounge around a little bit, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I didn't really think about who I am or whatever, what I mean. I'm just this thing. And so inside this poem, I was struggling, and I was having the epiphany. It was like a little deep thoughts moment of this epiphany where I'm writing and I'm learning at the same exact time because the words don't feel like they're mine. It happened all the time, people. I don't know if I can define who I am because I am that person. I am an element of the compound of truth. We like to think of truth as an element, don't we? It's non-divisible. It simply is. But truth is actually, potentially, at any level of magnitude. There are truths at the human level. There's truths at the God level. Isn't God everything? Everything in the universe, our sustainer, our maintainer. So, truth can be big and complex, omnipotent. Is there a singularity of truth? I don't know. You know that little feeling you have when you have something on the tip of your tongue? An actor's name, a movie name, something. It's on the tip of your tongue. Oh my God, I just had it. What is it again? And there's that epiphany moment, that feeling inside your chest of, I'm going to get this. I just had it, which means I can get it again. And all I need to do is just loop. Don't get distracted. Shut the hell up, everyone. Stop counting if I'm counting, that kind of thing, right? And I think that we overlook that little emotion because we are typically frustrated when we want something. We're trying to retrieve something from the universe, from ourself, and we're struggling. I think that is a godlike moment. When we type something into a database to search, Google, whatever, and it's taken a little while to find it, especially when you try to find a file on a Windows computer. Holy jeez, you better pour a pot of coffee for that fucking experience. You're waiting, anticipating. You want to get on with life. Give me the results because I got more things to do once these results come back. That's what I'm feeling when I think about trying to split this atom of thought, this singularity concept of this touch point between the soul and the body. So we could sit and philosophize about the soul. I have a whole episode on the soul. I can't remember if it's any good. But we know the way that we behave, and we know, for those of us that haven't been raised inside some crazy eyes wide shut world where, the elite pound us so badly as children we have no empathy and we end up some reptilian robot. When we have love and empathy and we enjoy kindness, we are living in the bosom of God's smorgasbord his panacea of emotions. And so even though we do not have the complete menu of his options for us as these beings, we know a lot. We know a lot of the core stuff. But what about that touch point? How do you meld, create an interface between oil and water? I believe that, a friend of mine was reminding me that the Hutchison effect was able to blend, the claim was, they were able to blend wood into metal. And my explanation for that is he was fiddling with the very frequencies of energy that is wood and metal. And instead of them being opposing forces or unique elements of which do not share their spiral configurations of ether, he was able to make them dance with sacred geometry as injected into those elements or projected onto those elements with electricity and electromagnetism. And he was able to make them get along. All right. That's interesting. That's a bit of a metaphor for this undefinable moment when our body connects with our soul. Or really, it's the other way around, chronologically speaking. But let's throw something else out there while I'm thinking about it. Would you want God to reveal to you that when it really comes down to it, you're just a Swiss watch inside? That even your soul is just a microprocessor? Or an automatic transmission? Would you really want to know that you're a mechanical device? He made you, and that's great. Or does your hubris want you to believe that you are something so existentially more beautiful than that, an apparition? Do you take solace in the fact that we are intangible? Because it feels way more cool, doesn't it? When I watched Westworld, and I'm rewatching it with a friend of mine, there seems to be this thing of, when I watch it, there's a part of me that says, it is so beautifully written to ride that fine line between sentient android, I guess, and sentient human. I would say that in that show alone, they've proven that the androids became far more beautiful and sentient than any human being in that fucking place, besides maybe Bernard and Ford and a few of the other people that work in the staff. Because the people visiting, beside Ed Harris's character, they were Neanderthals, primitive, embarrassing. Would we be mad if we were machines? Maybe again, we're not ethereal machines. Maybe we're love machines. But what would we be if we weren't machines? What is the other definition? All right, so you think of yourself in some existential apparition, a vaporous cloud. All right, does that make you feel better? I'll be honest, I don't want to be a machine. It's for some reason, the definition of man being a machine is, one, in terms of mechanical machine, as we observe the brain and the chemicals that go through our body and the nervous system. Beautiful invention, the human body, no doubt. Hats off to the man. But it doesn't seem complex enough to explain in any way, shape, or form this state of consciousness that we have, does it? And so we would think that if we were mechanical, that the level of intelligence that we would have to put into a single paradigm of existence would be so absolutely phenomenal that it couldn't fit in a normal world. It was like the Deep Thought's computer creating Earth as its successor computer. Such a brilliant fucking book, man. If you want to listen to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, or you want to get into that, go get the BBC broadcast, the original. And I'll warn you, the first 4 broadcasts were redone after the first one because they used a bunch of Pink Floyd music and all that stuff, and so they were warned you got to re-record those. And when they re-recorded them, they lost a little bit of the inflection from some of the actors, unfortunately. But that's the way you want to hear it because it's perfect like that. The books are chronologically, I think, destroyed until the second and third book came out. Anyway. But the story goes is they invented a computer to answer the question of life, the universe, and everything. And when it ran for 11 million years, its answer was 42. And so they were like, what the hell is 42? And he goes, well, the problem is you haven't really figured out what the question is. And he goes, well, come on, it's the question, life, the universe, and everything. He says, yeah, but what is the question? And so he said, I will invent a computer that will come up with that question. And it was the planet Earth. And the original cavemen that were on the planet, which are not us, by the way, were the organic matter that made up the brain of this computer. I mean, just beautiful. And I haven't read every science fiction book in the world, so perhaps he was lifting that off somebody else. But whoever thought of that is incredibly ingenious. Of course, the mechanical machine that would account for all of the beauty and amazing original thought and original conception that man creates that AI will never be able to do. AIs can imitate man. That's about as good as it could be. It'd be a big Turing test, 8.0 or whatever. But it's not what we are. We know we are dynamic and sentient. We're all a bunch of Captain Kirks, as long as we don't smoke too much weed. It's a mind blower, isn't it? What is our soul? What is it made out of? How complex is it? If I went to a college course taught by God, what would that homework look like? What would the book look like? What would be the very first day of Soul Construction 101? Fascinating to think about what that first lesson might sound like. In my Infinity Project, I've got to answer these questions. To quantify oil and water without a Hutchinson effect. Because these two are one. They influence each other. But we know the human body can be pulverized in death. And yet the soul doesn't die. It's not as if, if you just die in bed, well, your soul is totally fine and then it goes on. But if you're crushed by a gigantic shipping container, oh, no, your soul's completely destroyed in that process and you actually die. You totally disappear. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Well, we know that's not true either. What's interesting about the conversations that we've had about afterlife is that I think that if you take the subject matter of afterlife and the other subject matter that I've covered several times about death, the fear of death, and the fact that I guess there are far more people in this universe scared of death, and I mean terrified of death, than I ever thought existed. And super brilliant intellectual people most often have a fear of death. Now there is a I don't want to fucking die, and there's fear of death. That's two different things. Of course you don't want to die. There's more to come. And if you're in a suffering bubble right now, well, time heals all, and the older you get, the more that cliche becomes true, and you get through all of your tough times. The unimaginable happens after you think you can't live another second. I've had it happen to me numerous times. But the reason why I think, there's all kinds of barriers to getting over the hump of death, to have a conversation that doesn't sound like the New Age section in Barnes & Noble, which has some great material in it, but it's always promoted as, oh, you're in the cuckoo owl. And of course, just to make sure that you do feel like a complete cuckoo, they publish horrible drivel right next to great books. Now, scientists don't want to go there because then the nerd sociopaths of the world that have these goddamn human sacrifice rituals within the CERN Hadron Collider, worshipping the goddess of Shiva, the goddess of destruction, goddess Shiva of destruction, I guess we might say that. They're not going to be important as much anymore because they can't conceive of this shit, I guess, because they're so left brain, and you can only see a soul with your right brain. They don't want to lose their temporary grasp on power, which is why they persecute anyone who comes up with a modern theory that contradicts the old one that they injected into their veins. So we sit here in this retarded mode, paused in time, slowed down in time. We need to collaborate in this project, and we don't have enough people that are awake to create a community. And because so many things get thrown into the pile, I mean, it baffles me how many intelligent people I meet that have such contradicting paradigms of predicting the future, analyzing what we are, not realizing that you cannot have, well, I shouldn't say it, but some of these things directly oppose the other. Astrology and numerology going together is so hilarious to me. And I don't want to be told I don't fucking understand them, because big fucking surprise, that shit ain't that complicated to understand, okay? I'll be friendly to you if you tell me that you believe that kind of stuff, but you're talking about completely arbitrary fucking systems of belief. Numerology is the most highly manipulated bunch of fucking bullshit ever. Now, you can use it as a enigma box to communicate in a Q post. That's not predicting the goddamn future and stuff. That's simply hiding numbers inside so you can communicate and have a protocol that goes back and forth. If you pick your decoder ring in your current numerology, and sure, you can say, okay, when you see the 17, that means this. When you see that, that means, but you got to use this particular numerology calculator set to all this other fucking random stuff, which is basically what Enigma Box was. And then to say, oh, no, it's the stars. The stars. Well, you don't even know what the fuck those things are. You don't. You don't know any goddamn thing about those things. We know so little about the moon. We're still lying to ourselves about what's at the core of the earth. And you want to tell me that you understand the stars so fucking well it's going to predict your future? Tell you what kind of person you are? Don't do that to yourself. Don't surrender your chance to become a sentient human being with real information derived from your very existence by cowarding down to a system that was invented by, backyard mystics to tell people how their world worked when they were using, fucking leeches to solve their health problems. When they had headaches, they fucking, hammered a goddamn hole in your brain. Same eras of when this stuff came out. And it's been massaged and changed because as people reveal the hoax, we got to make this stuff seem complicated again and legit again. Oh, yeah. Well, how about we put applesauce in there? Fuck yeah, applesauce. It's the dark matter applesauce theory that solves all the problems. All that shit I told you before is all vague, and we got it all fixed up now. This is why we can't focus on what the hell's going on in this universe, because we're off in this Candyland fucking world, I respect beyond anything an individual's desire to find these truths. So when I hear people into these things, I'm like, okay, what's cool about you is that you're looking. You're really looking. But it's kind of like people who travel through life and, 1 year they're in a paleo diet, second year they're a vegetarian, third year they're a vegan, fourth year they're trying to live off sunlight. And every time they visit your house, you get in a circle with them. Boy, everything they had before was bullshit, and what they're in now is completely it. That is not the kind of person I typically can have a tremendous conversation with. I do like to hear their journey. Well, what did you think about that? What was the transition? I will say, though, this has been a theme in my life personally in the last, I'd say almost 10 years. There are a lot of, I'll say, technologies out there. And they're technologies for the mind. I did a whole episode about technologies of the mind, which has a different tense. It's that episode's about how the elite know how to program our minds and beliefs and paradigms, and they use that technology of the mind to screw us. In this conversation, I'm talking about something different. A church would be a technology, a protocol to how to behave. What Jesus Christ brought everyone was a new technology to upgrade the operating system from the Old Testament. Old Testament's 1.0, Jesus Christ is 2.0. Okay, there you go. You could probably keep, and Jesus didn't come and say, okay, all that Old Testament stuff's completely gone. He just simply said, all right, when it comes time to like saving your soul and sinning and the original sin and all that kind of stuff, well, I got a better way to do this. But there are organizations out there which call themselves business schools. Some of them are horribly pyramided, and they do force recruitment on you like crazy, because the people who could give a fuck about any of it, who are cashing all your goddamn checks and living wherever the hell they want to live, they're laughing all the way to the bank with this devoutness of their followers. Happens all the time. Now, sometimes a great person will create a technology, and it might end up being called a church in the end, but whatever, who cares? It's a protocol. It's a method of living. Rules that for some people work extremely well. But it's only to the degree you can understand the methodologies and the science and the technology that will give you either a positive or a negative when you're done. And then people inherit these organizations after the founders pass away, and they can take it to a dark place. Sometimes families have reputable members of their family tree. For as far back as they know, no one did anything weird. And then you'll have a family member in your family. Most families, I think, have one of these, where you had a creepy uncle. There's a family with a lot of brothers and sisters, and one of the brothers fell in love with his sister, and so he did inappropriate things. That happens too. And so you know that if someone were to write an essay on your surname and your family, that you're going to hope to God no one finds out that very private stuff about your family. Because it might spread to be a judgment on you or the majority of the family that didn't do any of these things. Now, I've seen these events happen where people are falsely accused of that kind of stuff, and I've seen one where they lived way too long after what they did. So I've seen both sides of that game. So these institutions can get those sort of deprecated reputations. Some of them are pure evil from the very beginning. I mentioned these technologies and these various institutions, some of which are just oil and water to each other, because there's a lot of information out there. Like this gentleman I'm going to go research, Gurdjieff. If we had an institution that was financed to bring together the finest minds in the world, all vetted for their left-right balance, we bring them in and we give them aptitude tests of left-right brain activity and maturity prior to letting them in the institution. And then as we assign them to their group and assign their tasks, we do it proportionate to their ability of having a left and right brain activity being integrated. So we could bring in amazingly astute left brain people and then far out right brain people, all centered. They're not vacillating between these competing philosophies. And so, it's like the person that believes everything that they read. Got to be careful. So we want the highest integrity people. But we bring them into the institution, and what would be the very first step of the institution if our goal was to develop a language by which the left and right brain could communicate? The soul and the body. The body being the left brain and the soul being the right brain. I think that the most basic scientific approach would be to harvest all of the data that has ever been written from the oldest scripts of perhaps Babylonian time, all the way up to present time. Bringing in individuals that have PhDs in these areas so we can immediately get to it without having to redo this potentially a 30-year journey of someone. Imagine getting all these professors in there that are so worried about someone contradicting them and say, look, no, you're going to be completely rewarded for your knowledge in something that may be 100% untrue. Or we may reward you because you are going to be giving birth to old philosophies that you knew the entire time you were studying it for 30 years of your life was the way that the world should work. I mean, I should actually increase that to about a 50-year study. People in their 70s, 80s, 90s, they're geniuses in these other areas of thinking. But we bring it together, we harvest all the records, and we start to meticulously find the touch points of people's thinking over the millennia as to how the soul operates in relation to the human body, from Hindu philosophers. And this would be a global effort, wouldn't it? But he would take all of the technologies from every religion, from every business school, from Tony Robbins to something else, Scientology, dig into L. Ron Hubbard, dig into, Plato and Socrates and everyone who's ever talked about anything. The Jean Baudrillards and the Marshall McLuhans and all the forgotten heroes, just like those individuals. Bring it together and see if we can't come up with a unified technology that is the highest level of integrity of both paradigm and communication across the paradigm. Have an elimination process, just like a big esports event, Well, and the thing is by churning the data and perhaps rechurning it and going backwards and forwards and just trying to see if perhaps something we didn't understand, instead of throwing it away, it goes on a very special pile that says, this is the pile that needs to be extra analyzed because we can't determine exactly what these individuals meant. They obviously had an idea when they wrote it down. Now, some might be very simplistic, and we can say, that's covered by this more advanced version of the theory. This person stood on this person's shoulders, so we give credit to the individuals that did that. No one's ego should be involved, but we should know about, we should know, I think, the timetable that man has consumed in order to gain this enlightenment. I think that might be a fascinating sort of genealogy of these ideas and these concepts. When they had the genome project, they're trying to sequence all of the nucleic acids in the strand of a DNA. The Folding at Home project is trying to figure out how all the proteins function within the human body. The true genius of our ability to exist. But it was very mathematical. looking at the nucleic acid chain combinations. It was mathematical. Look, 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 look. Write it down, write it down. Computer does all the rest of the mulching, finds the patterns. But think about what the computer can't do. They can't get in there and get into the philosophy and the undiscovered missing link DNA of our existence. If you want to know how stupid DNA is going to be 1,000 years from now, ask it what exists after this life. Unless we have new mechanical machines that can sense the soul and sense God and look at the entire nervous system of this universe, of the matrix outside the matrix, there'll be no way for this AI to do anything. It's going to simply know what we've told it. And yes, I'm aware that they're hooking AIs to AIs, but honestly, will the computer ever know what it really is? Can it figure out it's in a box somewhere with fans blowing and it needs energy? I mean, the movie Matrix was beautiful that it actually had sort of explained these robots that were harvesting human energy. You don't, as far as I remember, out of the 3 movies that were made, there was never an attempt to say the chicken and the egg went one way or the other. Did they incubate us? Did we incubate them? They tend to give the idea that we run off their power, or they run off our power. Seems like we may have gone first, maybe not. But I think about trying to create a project where we think like this. It would have to be funded by individuals who simply want to know the answer. And it is so absolutely important to them that they're willing to sacrifice their hard-earned money, their calorie energy converted into monetary units, to be able to potentially contribute to this answer. But now let's think about it. Let's say we kick off this project January 1st, 2020, and there are enough people to put together a host of buildings. We write a gigantic business plan for the entire thing. It would be interesting because it'd be metaphorically the combination of a syllabus and a business plan, mixing it together, a nonprofit and a profit paradigm being mixed together. But if there was a person who was 80 years old, sitting on top of some giant cash pile, and said, you know what, I'm old, and maybe I'll live another 10 years, 15 years, maybe even 20 years, and I'm going to make this money available for you to build this institution and bring together the greatest minds in the world. Hopefully they're one of the participants. Someone's got to be in charge. That's the other thing that's really tough to sort out. They may not hear any answer from the Deep Thoughts computer in their lifetime. And so they're going to have to revel in the fact that what they left behind was an opportunity for man to solve some of this question, this nagging question of life, the universe, and everything. What are we? I often wonder, and I've said this in several episodes, but do I really want all the answers, let's say, when I die? Maybe it's the privilege that I've always had this kind of notion that, and I don't really visually see it this way, I'm going to make this up on the spot here, but this idea that, let's just say, God had a gigantic library with every single book about everything, and it is, for the very first time in your life, 100% true. Close your eyes, grab a book, open it to a page, and behold the truth. I mean, wow. Would that not be an epic moment in a movie? But the question is, let me further the theory one more step. Why would God keep it in books, individual tomes of truth? And the beautiful answer would be, because you don't want to know it all at once, lest you be God yourself, and thus carry the burden of God. And so you get to selectively ingest portions of truth. It does take time to read it and ingest it and understand it. Hopefully, God's a really good writer. If he's anything like Jean Baudrillard, we're going to need a respirator to get through the book. When I was a child, I used to think of it, I guess I probably still think of it a little bit like this. I saw myself as a kid, probably because of the many descriptions of death and the notion of floating away from your body. Because I was a little cosmologist of my own, little astronomer, I immediately took myself away from the Earth's surface. And I was thinking, as I'm backing away from Earth, I'm having a warm, comforting feeling. There's no more pain anymore. In fact, there's no concept of pain anymore. Except that I'm reveling in the fact that it ain't happening. And all the knowledge of the universe is pouring through me. What were the dinosaurs? Did they exist? How was the universe created? Did that girl in the 6th grade playground actually like me or not? I don't know. But all those things are made available. And then, even as a kid, I thought, maybe I don't want to know it all at once. Maybe that'd just be taking all the fun out of it. It's like, again, it's like playing a video game and going into God mode. It immediately becomes incredibly boring. I think it'd be an interesting scientific experiment, and maybe Nintendo's done this experiment, because they do all kinds of wild lab stuff. Take a bunch of kids on their favorite games, and that they've never played in God mode. These individuals have never done it before. And let them play it for a while. Maybe give them a new level where it's just so exciting, but it's really hard, but they really want to play it. And then say, okay, we're going to put this into God mode and play as aggressively as you feel like you need to. And tell us when you feel bored. And find out how short that span is, because I think it's a very, very short time span. I think in my own life as a game designer from birth, I think my average is about 15 minutes, and I'm done. I played, like I keep saying, I keep playing Fallout 4. I haven't played it in several weeks, if not months. And I'll turn on every once in a while. It's kind of an interesting, fun, alternate world to go home to. As fucked up as that is. And I put it in God mode once because I was like, oh, wow, there's all these wild mods that go in there. I turned it on, and it was just abysmal. I turned them all off really quick. I didn't like anything to do with it. It was like I took a pistol and I could kill anything with one shot, which is almost the case at whatever 136 level I am. So we're not going to get that university. We're not going to get those donators. We're not going to get any devoted effort to this endeavor. So we're left literally in a backyard, talking into a microphone, hoping that through this sort of distributed computer network that we have, that's sort of like the SETI project or the Folding at Home project, it's our brains. We're harvesting a bunch of brains together to think about these things. And because not everyone's interested in this existential stuff, or perhaps they don't have initially the understanding of what we're talking about, hopefully they pursue and get on board, we are maybe kicking off from an episode. I'm putting little stubs in your brain of things that we need to talk about. I can't assign it to anyone because I don't know anyone. You guys come back in the comments section, and then we continue and continue. You mature me. You advance my knowledge, pointing me in directions. I try to do my best to get into all this stuff deeply. And then I make more episodes, and maybe I surmise the research that the listeners have done with my own research, and we make another video, part 2, or we give it a different name. And we're trying to do this distributed CPU, deep thoughts computer. We are technically, at that point, with a directive, we go from being a chaotic mess on the surface of this planet to being the true computer that Deep Thoughts invented in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I think what's sort of, it's sort of sad that we can be, on the internet chatting with each other and realize, like Dr. Stephen Greer said in his Sirius project, whatever, is a serious movie. He said, look, there's no country on Earth that has set forth an objective like JFK to get to the moon in order to create a 0-point energy system. Boy, if that doesn't reveal a deep state, I don't know what does. I don't know what does. That's reprehensible. I think it's equally reprehensible that we don't have these global projects. And I know there's think tanks that I have no idea about, and of course there's a bunch of fucking black projects out there that do hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars worth of research into these things. I mean, the intelligence agencies of the world have done efforts like this. I am aware of that, but without the research results being published to the public, of which we fucking paid for, they have all the knowledge and we don't. And of course, why are they trying to use it? They're trying to weaponize it all. I think what a lot of us are trying to get to with some of this technology enlightenment is that we want to hobble criminals. We want the ultimate denominator, right? The equalizer, I should say, where anyone who wants to bully someone else in any way, shape, or form, academically, physically, what have you, spiritually, that you can just, one, you immediately know it's happening because we've made, one of these things is not like the other. It immediately sticks out and we're like, oh, I'm very sorry that you feel like you need to dominate me in your life. But because I've got this widget of knowledge, I'm going to neutralize you from being able to do that to me. And then we'll talk about your therapy. I'm going to ask nicely before I nail you, and then it's over. You're not going to do that to me anymore. And because now we've identified you as a problem in society, we're going to alert the rest of society that we have one that's got a big problem. Unfortunately, these individuals cabal together, don't they? So it's a big mess. So that's what appeals to me about doing this show, is that we get a secret little club. And I only say secret because we're shadow banned. Not because we want to be some, the next Masonic club of any kind. We want the world to know. We want the world to think. We want that 5-year-old girl to go, oh, well, isn't it just like this? And we all go, holy crap. You're right, honey. You're right. And all of our brains go poof, because they're so simplified by a beautiful mind. Would it be interesting? I'm sure someone has given this analogy before, but for me, it just became a new one. Wouldn't it be interesting if the most enlightened beings on this planet are children and the stupidest creatures are adults? And that because we minimize out of sheer narcissistic post-adolescent development, we minimize children when they have all the answers. And then all we need to do is sit down with children and present our case to them as if they are little gods. Before we corrupt them with our biases, our racism, or what have you, we work with them to get the answers out of them before they lose connection with the universe, instead of indoctrinating them away from their pure state that happens after birth. Instead of subtracting what they know, we get it out of them. What's interesting about this process of social media, it's like almost like a social media talk show that we have here, is people will give me amazing references, and by all means, I want you to continue doing that. But there is a bit of a resistance I have sometimes with certain subjects, because I feel like I want to do my own research first, my own philosophical diving first, before I take someone else's paradigm into consideration. Because I feel that when I do it first, I understand the reference material much deeper than if I let reference material set up all the borders around my mind. Okay, this is a 4-sided room, not an 8-sided room. Oh, well, I thought okay. It's like you give up on your own instincts. And perhaps the reference comes from a time that goes back way too far. If I read a piece of reference from, 20 BC, maybe it's not sophisticated enough to address what my mind would have done with it had I created original research at 2019. I'd like to encourage all of you to do that from time to time. One of the things I do on the show is I try to say that what if it was our job to do something? How would we do it? Without any formal degrees in anything, you just have your incidental knowledge. You have a degree, but you don't have some massive PhD in exactly what we're talking about. Instead of that, we have to sit down at the table and, brainstorm, write stuff on the board, come together year after year after year, pushing together everything that we know prior to doing research. What that does is that pioneers your mind to think, because as you're contemplating a concept you're trying to solve, the first thing you try to do typically is to find the extent of the problem. If you were to come into, let's just say I came into a classroom in a school, and the classroom is notorious. This particular class is a combination of kids that are just bad. They've been taught wrong. Someone's got a bad home or something. You have to look around that class and go, oh my God, how many kids am I dealing with here? Maybe you teach 7 hours a day. And so you're like, okay, my first hour is pretty good. Second hour is just a fucking nightmare. And then it kind of gets better, then it gets really worse after lunch because all the kids are tired after eating food. Maybe they're nuts because they've drinking a bunch of energy drinks at lunchtime. You need to figure out the extent of the problem you're trying to solve. Now, that's a very physical analogy, but imagine trying to solve for the extent of the soul. We don't know how big it is. We don't know what its responsibilities are, to be honest. I think we understand a lot of its spectrum, but perhaps if one says the soul marries the body and therefore has a paradigm of limitation, then perhaps the soul has an infinite number of additional emotions, additional things that occur when freed from the human body. Our dreams. What if our dreams are the playground for the soul? Well, dreams are pretty free form, aren't they? You can do anything in a dream. If it can be conceived, it happens. Interesting. So I think that to define some parameters is where my infinity project comes in. We have to be able to deal with the infinite unknown as well as the suspected infinite known, or the absolutely implicit infinity that we know that exists, like a number set. Infinitely divisible, infinitely exponential. Isn't it amazing that we will live, potentially, in this universe forever, and we'll never, ever, ever, ever be able to conceive of all the numbers that exist? Are numbers just a metaphysical construct? I don't know. I certainly like having two cookies more than one. They do exist. We like to have more money in the bank than less money in the bank. We like to have more love than less love. Seems that we quantify things to deal with our paradigm as if it's just simply the first building block of dimension. I think it might be interesting to parse the notion of what matters to the soul and what matters to the body. A body is a ever-changing, ever-recreating paradigm that has strategic resources by which, if not consumed, we die. Water, food, sunlight. But wait, we need love. to exist. And some of you might just go, oh, that's ridiculous. No, we do. The babies that aren't held and hugged die. Because the soul says, oops, I must be in the wrong place and time. These human beings don't understand human life to the degree that they don't pick me up and hold me and love me. So perhaps there's a strategic resource of love that comes from one's soul that feeds into the soul of the child, just like water or milk from a breast. It must come from one place and enter into the child. Because only human beings, who are a soul symbiotic creature, can give that love into a child, at least at the quality of which a human body soul would need. It'll perish if it doesn't get it. And maybe you could take a baby and surround it by a bunch of puppy dogs that love it to death, but perhaps that's not compatible. It's good love, trust me. But it's not enough. A puppy can't pick up a baby and hold it against its bosom. I know there's some cute videos where dogs hug babies, but we're talking about every day, hour to hour, until that child can start living on its own. Touch points between the soul and the body. That's the mystery. Where does it touch? How does it touch? How is it that when you tell a lie and someone catches you in it, you blush? I had a boss that told a big lie to me one day. He was very insecure about me being in the company. And he kind of thought it was dominant species time. And he needed to get rid of me, so he told me a lie about my superiors, essentially saying that they all conceded, they had a consensus, I should say. They agreed that I wasn't the type of employee that should stay at the company. The problem is he mentioned a person who was an extremely close friend of mine. And so I knew he was lying. He's a bad liar anyway. So once he said that, I had this huge relief off my system. I was like, well, so-and-so and I are very close friends, something of which your dumb fucking brain couldn't pay attention to, even though her and I have been together the entire time you've been at this company, having meetings for 2 or 3 hours, philosophizing about the world and how to run companies and how to treat employees correctly. But he was such a narcissistic fucktard. This guy, my God. He didn't pick up on it because he was an ignorant piece of shit. And so I said to him, well, I'm going to go up and talk to them since you just made a big claim. And we'll get to the bottom of this. This dude had dark skin to begin with. He turned purple red. I have never seen a guy change colors in my fucking life. This guy would have made a chameleon go, God damn, that was good. That was amazing. Holy shit, you changed colors more than I can. He was fired 45 days later, but it was only because he got a 45-day parachute. The guy was utterly liquidated. His reaction to me calling his bluff made him change colors. And I don't think his body heard what I said. I think his soul heard what I said. His soul told his body, you just fucked up, dude. And the body has a reaction to that. This guy was terrified instantaneously. He was acting on behalf of Satan, if there ever is anything like that. He was being pure evil shithead. And he's probably a different person today. At that time, it was probably the lowest hour of his life. Because I had maintained integrity the entire time I'd been at this company. I got to work there another year. Made a ton of money, too, in that year. So we have our homework. I'd like to suggest, plead with you guys, that as you live your daily lives, please don't forget this one little thing. And if you can, get an analog pen and an analog piece of paper. Maybe even a thing called a notebook. I use computational notebooks because they're awesome. They're gridded paper. But start to write down free-form thoughts into a notebook about this subject of what evidence do you have that would explain this marriage between the soul and the body. What do you know about your soul? What do you know about your body that isn't utterly trivial? Don't write that crap down. I mean, well, maybe you can, but resource management might be one of the more trivial things. I need food, I need water, I need sunlight. But go for that weird twilight zone area, that mezzanine between consciousness and unconsciousness. Let's start laser focusing in on this. Write it down. Let's do it over the next year. Report in if you happen to have an epiphany. And please, 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 do not hold it to yourself because you think you're going to make some goddamn money off this thing, right? Or you want to have all this credit in the world. That isn't serving humanity at all. It's not serving you at all. Perhaps, again, you can only take the first 2 steps of the staircase. Then I pick you up and I carry you 1 step. And someone picks us up and takes us 3 more steps. And then maybe I rest up and I take us 1 more step. And some little 5-year-old girl takes us up 8 steps. That's the way we have to approach this existence on this planet. Your job, it's for suckers, man. Seriously, unless this is your job. Let's pioneer. You know, when Magellan's running around and Christopher Columbus, the pedophile murderer, drug dealer, is running around the world claiming land that people already lived on, which is hilarious. That was lowbrow, easy pickings. I own this piece of land over here. What we are doing is pioneering the metaphysical. And if there's a book out there that solves all this crap for me, if someone's like, hey, you're just a dumbass, read this book. Okay, then why doesn't everyone know it? If these solutions exist, I don't think they do. I think people have talked about it. I don't want to hear any crap about the Bible unless you break it down outside of the Bible. Take your wisdom outside of the Bible. Don't tell me, well, the Bible says this, the Bible says that, Jesus says, I have no interest in that approach. Take it outside of this man-made paradigm, put it in God's realm, and allow us to discuss it as the men and women of God without this horrific shit that man puts around God. If you feel like you have to keep it in the Bible, then you're not ready for this class. You're not ready for this homework. Keep studying. Keep studying till you figure it out. You don't need to change your beliefs at all. Just be able to communicate outside that. Why does God exist? Because God says it exists. It's like, no, that doesn't work. That's a circular logic problem. Anyway, I think that's all I got on this one. I was just feeling it. Had to get out and do it. I think it's about 45 degrees out here. So, who loves you, baby? Everyone at deepthoughtsradio.com loves you. So go there if you want to change your feed, video to audio. If you want to get involved in the discussion, have a really good time on Facebook, please join our locked Facebook group. It's awesome. It's clean, great people, a lot of fun. A lot of stuff you can probably read that thing for 2 days without posting anything. We have such a good community today. we just have people that go back between various conspiracies, and man, a bunch of people in one realm, a bunch of people in another realm, and we take turns. You know, they take turns like, I think it's flat, I think it's round, I think it's flat, I think it's round, but they'll say really funny things to each other. Just the love is pouring out of that place. I love it. Please keep it up, guys. You guys are doing amazing jobs. The Twitter feed is up now, so you look up Deep Thoughts Radio on Twitter, but the link is right on the website. For those of you who want to contribute a couple bucks to the Patreon account, helps pay for cigars. I'm actually in need of buying a bunch of new cigars here, so there's already a crew up there helping out. So to all those who part with their hard-earned calorie energy to contribute to this show, believe me, it's your thought is really counts. I love it. So anyway, take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.